Labor and Small Enterprise Development, Jennifer Baptiste Primus, who will make a few announcements. We also have the Chief Secretary, who will also make a few announcements, and the Prime Minister, the Honorable Keith Rowley, will also make a few announcements. So we are going to start with the Minister of Labor, Mrs. Baptiste.
Good afternoon, members of the media. I am pleased to announce that today, Cabinet agreed to the establishment of a National Tripartite Advisory Council, also referred to as NTAC, in keeping with PNM philosophy of participatory governance. The establishment of NTAC also honors the Memorandum of Agreement signed between the People's National Movement and the Joint Trade Union Movement prior to the 2015 elections. It is not the only medium to be employed. Others are currently being developed. This council, the formation of this council, reaffirms the undertaking given by the PNM administration to involve all critical sectors of the national community in the government's decision-making process. The role of NTAC is to provide sound and informed multi-sectoral advice to the government on a wide range of initiatives, which would include effective implementation of Vision 2030, which is government's policy document, the identification and review of sustainable national development goals, development of a national campaign on productivity, which would include focus on proper work ethics, and in addition, looking at options that would redound to the creation of job opportunities. The other terms of reference of NTAC would be outlined at the launch. A major component of NTAC's responsibilities will include engaging civil society and other organizations in this country and including them in discussions on issues of nationwide importance as may be determined from time to time. Regarding the membership of NTAC, NTAC will be made up of 19 members, 6 from the private sector, 6 from the labor movement, and the rest from the government, which will include the Tobago House of Assembly. The chairperson of the National Tripartite Advisory Council is the Honorable Minister of Planning and Development, Camille Robinson Regis. Letters will be dispatched to the heads of the various sector organizations, inviting them to nominate their representatives, the most senior persons in their organizations, to sit on this very important body. The list of organizations will be announced at the inauguration ceremony, by which time all acceptances should have been received. NTAC will be supported by a well-staffed secretariat and will have its own administrative office accommodation. Members of the media are asked to note that NTAC will be officially inaugurated under the aegis of the Honorable Prime Minister on Tuesday, the 15th of March at 10:30 a.m. at the Diplomatic Center. Members of the media will be advised further on the other activities that will come on that most important date. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Baptiste Primus. I now invite the Chief Secretary to make a few announcements.
Thank you very much. We have just completed what I consider to be a very productive and highly significant session. I think it was a session where we were able to start or continue the process of strengthening the relationship between the Tobago House of Assembly and the central government. And the objective, of course, is to guarantee more effective delivery. And today it was done, I would say, in 2 phases. One, I had an opportunity to sit in on the cabinet meeting and to share with Cabinet some of the issues which we believe are important to the development of Tobago. And I must say that I was very heartened by the response and the collaborative way in which the Prime Minister and the members of Cabinet dealt with those issues. There are a number of them I'm not going to share all with you, but among the issues that I consider to be quite important is the long-standing issue of the Assembly Police Bill, which the Attorney General has promised to look at as a matter of priority so as to ensure that we can have it on the parliamentary agenda as urgently as possible. Security issues were also dealt with, and we're going to delve into them even further when I meet with the Minister of National Security at 8:30 on Monday morning. Support for the tourism sector in Tobago, and the Minister of Tourism was there, and we were able to look at some of the issues that are affecting the delivery of the services in Tobago and the tourism sector. And of course, that whole issue of land title regularization. We did get a commitment from the Attorney General that the 3 bills which were brought to the Parliament in 2010 but were allowed to be discarded, that they're going to look at them again. But the whole objective is to find a way that we can get through the judicial, the legislative, and the administrative challenges that have plagued us as we try to treat with this troubling question. So again, that is something that the Attorney General's office will be looking at. And as I left downstairs, the Minister of Housing was speaking to the Secretary of Settlement. As you know, the government has put forward a new plan to bring the private sector and have the private sector more involved in the delivery of affordable housing in Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the issues with which we treated, of course, is how the Tobago House of Assembly could benefit from that. And we also dealt with the public transportation issues that I think all Tobagonians know is a burning issue. And we are hoping that coming out of this exercise, there are going to be some initiatives to alleviate the situation. And we did have a working lunch, and it was in fact a working lunch, where members of the THA were able to sit with their counterparts, colleagues in the Cabinet, and discuss in more detail some of the common issues. But for me, what is most important is that the camaraderie, the collegial spirit would have been strengthened, and I expect that in the ensuing months that it will be even closer, and the results would be felt by the people of Tobago. So on behalf of us in the Tobago House of Assembly, and by extension the people of Tobago, I want to thank the Prime Minister and his team for the opportunity that was afforded to all of us in the Assembly and in the central government to develop the kind of relationship that will allow us to deliver more effectively, more predictably, and more consistently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Secretary. I now invite the Honorable Prime Minister to address us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me add my quota of welcome to those of you who are visiting Tobago, so that those of us visitors can feel at home. And thank you to the Tobago Media Corps for coming out in such large numbers. Today was a very special meeting for us in the Cabinet, in that we focused very heavily on matters which affect Tobago as well as other national matters. And some decisions were taken along the way. Interestingly enough, as I was sitting there, I remembered, if my memory serves me right, the last note I took to the Cabinet, and the last time I served in a Cabinet, was a note to provide a certain sum of money. I think the figure was $44 million, to begin the renovation of this hotel. I think that was the last note I took to the cabinet in 2008 before I was sent on long vacation. Today, the cabinet dealt with a very meaty note with respect to this national asset, the Magdalena. In that note, it was pointed out that the occupancy level in the hotel had fallen considerably and that there were certain management issues that we had to address. The hotel, as you may know, is being managed by a hired manager, but it falls to ETEC to sustain it. Now, it is a major asset which the state acquired. The state was in partnership with others to create this facility. And then later on, it turned out that the state purchased the interests of others. So this hotel is 100% government owned and is now being managed under ETEC. And things are not going as well as we would like, so certain decisions have to be made. One of the main problems that the hotel is facing is a problem that is being faced by the wider Tobago hotelry fraternity, and that is poor airlift of passengers into Tobago. And unlike other Caribbean destinations of a similar size, offering far less in some circumstances, Tobago is now reporting to the cabinet that we are the only island that does not have a direct flight from the major tourism destinations. And that being so, we have to take steps to rectify that if we are to rectify the downward slide that is taking place with respect to the performance of this facility. So we discussed at length how the national airline can and should be brought into the picture so that instead of funding losses at the location of the hotel and Tobago in general, and I dare say Trinidad and Tobago, we may be better spending those monies that we support the losses with on a better effort by Caribbean Airline to provide the airlift that's required. So the cabinet took a decision that the Ministry of Finance, where the corporation sole exists, and which where CAL reports, and the THA, and the Ministry of Tourism will meet as a matter of urgency and with proper technical and financial advice determine what role CAL must and can play in satisfying the need for improved air access to Tobago. There was also the issue of Tobago not maximizing the benefit of having available the Trinidad market so that the plants in Tobago can be properly populated, not just at the high season, but throughout the year. Because we have discovered and we have accepted that a lot of Trinidadians would like to come to Tobago but don't even bother to try because they can't get to Tobago because the airlift to Tobago usually is not satisfactory or available. One of the things that we discussed was that the subsidized fare to Tobago limits the government's involvement in the process, and the government's involvement limits the utilization of the destination of Tobago within Trinidad and Tobago. We intend to re-examine that and to come up with workable solutions so as to result in a freer flow of people from Trinidad to Tobago. And I must say that there are some creative developments which will come, and we hope that that will improve the use of the plans where we have investments in Tobago. We also acknowledge that this hotel, if it carries a proper international brand on it, we can more easily sell rooms to persons outside of Trinidad and Tobago. And we are aware that government did take steps to put a brand on this hotel, an internationally recognized brand name, and for reasons not well known to us, the process atrophied towards the end. Cabinet took a decision that the relevant authorities in the process will set about to try to attract to this hotel a proper, reputable international brand so that we can get the best of the investment that we have made over the years and try and halt the flow of the downward slide in terms of occupancy and other negatives. And of course, we also agree to extend the management, contracted management that is currently trying to hold things together in the face of the poor airlift, the difficulty with labor, and other problems which the management face in trying to run this hotel. I can tell you that one of the things that they've done, even under difficult circumstances, is to maintain the golf course here at a proper level so far, and that helps to attract some occupancy. In fact, much of the occupancy they have now are golfers and similar kinds of people who are hoping to use the facility. And that's what we expect of the Tobago hotels, to have good ancillary facilities. We also acknowledge that Tobago loses the high-end guests who would like to come to Tobago, but who more easily go off elsewhere, even from Trinidad, because trying to get to Tobago, get a flight to Tobago and to get back at your convenience is a problem. So rather than worry about getting to and from Tobago, these potential users of Tobago's facilities go off elsewhere where the airlift is more readily available. And we intend to rectify that in the conversation I mentioned earlier between CAL, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Tourism, and the Tobago House of Assembly. We also commit to make the investment in modernizing the terminal arrangements at Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson Airport, so that that infrastructural investment should position Tobago to receive a better inflow and egress of people using the facility. The Ministry of Finance will ensure that the resources are available as soon as we determine what is to happen there in terms of the proper physical structures. Tobago currently has a problem, and one of the problems that this hotel mentioned, is that in the middle of the high season last year, they had to lose occupancy because of a water shortage. And of course, that does not help in any way in attracting guests the next year or in maximizing those that you have. The time has come for us not to be in a position where Tobago's future in its economic effort, its major economic effort, is dependent on the vagaries of the weather. So we discussed and we agreed that WASA and the relevant ministries will immediately, as a matter of urgency, examine the potential for a desalination facility in Western Tobago to provide a sustainable supply of water to Tobago going forward, so that we will not have this problem of water shortage in Tobago as we go forward from year to year. It's not a major undertaking, and one of the things we'll consider is the engineering possibility, if it exists, in the economics of combining the power plant output in terms of heat, if it's available. But whatever is available engineeringly, looking at that in the first instance in the Cove area or some similar area in Tobago, to ensure that we provide a sustained amount of water to Western Tobago, and the rest of the water will supply the rest of the island, and we should solve that problem once and for all. We also have Cabinet took a decision to examine without prejudice the Tourism Development Corporation and its role in promoting, developing, marketing Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago as a destination. I can tell you, in the months that we have been in government, we have been looking at this, and we are dissatisfied with the current arrangement, and we are sure that better arrangements can be made. And what we've decided to do is to get the relevant technical support in short order, I think to report within 3 months, on the kinds of models of tourism development and marketing that are available in the Caribbean and elsewhere, which we can remodel Tobago's arrangement on. We've looked at the numbers, we've looked at the expenditure, we looked at the behavior, and we've come to the conclusion that the TDC, its expenditure and its behavior, is contributing little to the marketing of Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago as a destination. And therefore we need to rectify that. And within just over 3 months from now, we will report as to what new model the government will proceed to pursue. So those are some of the decisions we've taken here today, among others, but those are the ones that we think we can mention to you at this time. And the most important thing that I think we got out of today is that the THA and the central government can and must work together hands in hand to deliver the services of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, particularly the people of Tobago who rely on a good working relationship between the THA and central government. These are times when the Minister of Finance reports quite regularly that our revenues, our national revenues, are not what they should be. There have been some considerable and There continues to be some considerable decline in our revenues, but the people of Tobago will understand, as others in the nation understand, that whereas in 2011, there was one particular company that was paying $9 billion in taxes. This year they may pay zero. And that's the kind of scenario that we're up against. So we can't expect to be in the same position revenue-wise, but in terms of making good common sense decisions, we can do that. For example, one of the problems that this hotel has is that it doesn't have a beach that's usable. It's close to the sea, but there's no beach that guests can go on. So persons coming to Tobago, locals and foreigners, you don't see them on the beach. But we spent all this money invested in this facility, and we haven't spent any money on creating a beach. Interestingly enough, in this cabinet, there's an engineer, there's a geologist, there are other technical people. And today, we took a look at the coastline outside this hotel, Mr. Imbert and I, and we've concluded that the thing to do is to make the relevant breakwater, which can be done relatively easily, with some of the monies that we spend on the losses. And once a breakwater is built according to proper engineering standards, a beach can be established outside this hotel, and it will change this hotel for all times. We intend to put that in train through the relevant technical arrangements, and we'll find the funding to do it so as to get the best of the investments already made. So in a way, I'm saying, we might not have money to do everything you want to do, but whatever money we have, we need to spend it in a way that gives us the best benefit. So there are some things that we need to do and must do, and we'll try and find the money to do that, and let those things carry us forward. So having said that, I simply want to thank you all for making the effort to come, and I'm sure you might have one or two questions for me. And now is your time I say, okay, Anthony, we can start with you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I want to find out if you were speaking about getting a brand for the Magdalena, whether that would include a regional brand. You mentioned an international brand. It's been reported that Butch Stewart has been to Tobago on 2 occasions in the new year. Is that a consideration in taking the Magdalena forward? Secondly, can I ask you about the complaints of contractors and suppliers that the government owes them billions, and there's been no announcement from the government on arrangements to deal with those debts?
Let me take the first one about Butch Stewart. Yes, Sandals management came to Tobago, and they looked around, and one of the areas they looked at was this hotel. And one of the things that negated an interest in this hotel was the absence of a beach. But we do know that they continue to maintain some interest elsewhere in Tobago, so we'll have to wait and see the outcome of that. So from a point of view of dealing with the Magdalena, the Sandals interest is not part of that discussion. The other question you raised is government's debt to contractors. Yes, the government owes a lot of contractors because a lot of work is always going on in government. Government is a continuum. So when an election changes the personnel, it doesn't mean that the government's responsibilities or the national program of work continues. But what is interesting is that because of how certain things were done in some instances, not all, the whole question of the nature of the debt becomes a problem. Not to mention, the government also has the problem of its financial ability to pay some of the debts. Because one of the things that happened in the previous period of time, and I don't want to say previous administration because I do not want to pass the problem of today onto the last administration. But what has happened before, and it's something that this government has to keep its eye on, and it's something that we are actively working on in the public service to restore the public service to the role that the public service should play, and that is a lot of persons were let loose on the treasury to spend money that they did not have in their portfolio or in their department. And they went out and they ran up debts all over the place. Let me give you one example. in one small state company, without having money within the company to fund it, the chairman, not the board, the chairman, without the tenders committee, awarded $400 million in contracts in the election season last year. Let me repeat that. In one state company, a chairman, without going through the tenders committee, which is the least they could have done, awarded $400 million in contracts during the last season. And over and above figuring out what these contracts were for, because I can tell you, that was to rehabilitate 37 kilometers of rural road. Try and figure that out. But the point I'm making is that that kind of expenditure could have been incurred when there was no money known to pay it. So that debt. Another one set about to find a mechanism to remove money from the treasury. So they decided to build a head office for $198 million, $180 million. And having taken that decision, they then paid $10 million to a contractor with no money to build the building. So the contractor has the $18 million, the 10% of the contract. The contractor has the $18 million. But the contractor is expecting money now to advance the project. But the state company has no money, except that they found the $18 million to give the contractor, which was the original objective. And since they can't progress the project, the contractor is now attempting to walk away under the guise of delay. Under the FIDIC rules, if you can't fund the contractor going forward, the contractor could leave the project or the delay. But then we found out that the bond that covered the 18 million expired 2 days after they got the money. So when we're talking about money is owed to contractors, yes, the state owes some money to contractors, but those are some of the circumstances under which the monies are owed. So we can't just run out and pay willy-nilly. Let me give you one other example. There's one other contractor saying that the government owes him $1 billion. That might be so. But the question you have to ask yourself, this contractor was really a benefactor of the national community, because to run up $1 billion in work with no money coming to you, we must say to you, thank you very much for being so kind to us. Because you must have been a real generous contractor to put out $1 billion of your own money, not being paid for the work that you were doing. And I tell you this so that you can understand the scenario against which claims are being made against the state. And if I had the time tonight until midnight, I could give you enough of that, because there's that much. The bottom line is the government is taking responsibility for valid debts and would discharge them, but we have to examine the circumstances to ensure that we are not paying what's left of taxpayers' potential to circumstances that ought never to have seen taxpayers' support.
Mr. Prime Minister, you mentioned, well, you asked a question about Butch Stewart and Sandler's interest in the hotel. And he said that because there is no beach, he has no interest.
No, I said one of the issues that might have negated their interest in the hotel is the fact that there's no real usable beach.
Right, and you mentioned that you looked at the beach and thinking of, yes, a beach could go in. So is it that he might revisit should a beach come in after?
I don't know that, because we are hoping that where there are other interests ahead of what we're talking about, that they could pursue those interests. But these are to be discovered as we go forward.
Okay, and you were talking about the CAL situation. The airlift coming into the hotel has not been good. Are there immediate measures that you want CAL to put in place so as to make the airlift into Tobago, even from Trinidad, because there are many problems traveling between the two islands? Are there immediate measures that CAL would be implemented to rectify some of those issues? And the other thing that I want to ask is, you spoke about TDC and the expenditure and behavior not in line with basically the needs of the country. What then is the situation with the board? Is there somebody, is the board going to be held responsible if that has been the situation with the TDC board?
Well, let me start with the first thing. The first point you made was the interest of the Sandals brand. That interest, we're looking at Tobago. We're hoping that if they find something in Tobago, they would pursue it, and then Tobago will have a brand which has been found to be very useful elsewhere in the Caribbean, in the Bahamas, in St. Lucia, and Grenada. So if we get a similar brand in Tobago, we're hoping that the terms and conditions could be such that we could benefit. Nothing is cast in stone. And if something is found not to be working, we have to be sufficiently confident and reasonable to know that change may bring us an improvement. So with respect to CAL providing better airlift from Trinidad to Tobago and into Tobago from the region and further abroad, yes, we believe that there are things that can be done. But I'm not here to preempt or to advise myself on what those things are. What we have said is that the Cabinet has instructed that they be looked at and that CAL be asked to come up with new and improved arrangements to solve the problem. We know what the problem is. We own an airline. We're spending money on all kinds of things. We're saying, now let's try and spend some money on a piece of problem which we think we can solve if we do what has to be done. We think that we can do things differently in some areas with respect to the airlift involving Caribbean Airlines. So that's where that will remain for the moment. And the other thing you mentioned was TDC. Yeah, we're not talking about holding anybody personally responsible at TDC. That would only happen if there are infractions on the part of individuals. We're talking about the institution which had set itself the responsibility of marketing us, making us more known to the outside world, so that when the tourists in the outside world look for a destination, Tobago would be on their lips or within their minds. Today, people pick their destinations on the internet. We don't know that the TDC has what is required to be on the internet to compete with Bahamas and Grenada and these places. So maybe we can do things differently to get a better result. And one of the things we're looking at is the whole model that the TDC is, as against another model which other people are using successfully.
Prime Minister, your recent rift with the WIC board has left some uncertainty as surrounding the staging.
Wait a minute, hold on. Tell me.
Patricia Nicholson, CTV.
CTV?
Yes. Your recent rift with the WIC board has left some uncertainty surrounding
I don't have any rift with the WICB.
Surrounding the staging of the third test match against India at the Queen's Park Oval. Could you tell us how your feelings on that?
Start over. I mean, the question is a little bit... Could you let me hear the question again, please?
Your recent rift with the WIC board has left some uncertainty surrounding the staging of a cricket match with India in the Queen's Park Oval. What are your views on that, your comments on that?
Well, the first thing is that I don't have a rift with the WICB board. CARICOM, of which I'm a part, CARICOM heads of government, has taken a position on WICB. And I will take very good care to make sure that WICB operatives don't make that my issue. I spoke at the CARICOM as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago with a seat at the table at the heads of government. And what the heads of government decided is what Trinidad and Tobago is bound by. After that, I saw a story in the papers about a test match being in jeopardy because of the government. All I will say on that, to whoever planned that story in the papers, since when the government of Trinidad and Tobago organizes test matches? And I say no more on that.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Good afternoon.
Kamal Jordis from CNC3. Sir, the issue... Did the management of the Magdalena indicate how significant a reduction in occupancy they're facing? And did they also indicate, for example, how their finances are? How prolonged has this reduction in occupancy been, and how has it affected their operation in terms of the management of finances?
Yes, we didn't get the information from the Magdalena. The Ministry of Tourism got the information, and the Ministry of Tourism supply the cabinet with the information. I'm talking here from memory, and I hope my memory is good. In 2011, I think it was, 2 years ago thereabouts, the occupancy at this hotel was in the order of 78%. At the high season, because you know the months of January, February, March, that's the high season when you get the best occupancy when the winter flow comes in. They were in the order of as high as 78%. Then the following year, that fell to 60-odd%. And this year, we are now into March, they're at 50% and lower. So that should give you an idea as to what's happening. And that will reflect itself in the earnings and so on and so on.
Prime Minister, just...
But one moment, I'll just tell you one thing though. In the meantime, in order to preserve the facility, to ensure that it doesn't deteriorate and it is maintained at a proper standard, ETEC, as I mentioned earlier on, which is the agency that runs this hotel, has been having to provide some financial support to ensure that the property does not deteriorate. And this hotel is still very important in the economy in Tobago. So therefore, the support that's provided by ETEC is to preserve economic activity in Tobago at a level, albeit where it's at now, but we believe that there are some things we can do to turn this thing around. The financial support comes in two forms. One is direct support recently, some direct support with respect to operations, which would be in the order of probably just over $1 million or thereabouts. But the capital expenditure to maintain the facility with other kinds of support would be a bit more. I think ETEC is aiming to spend about $4 million or thereabouts. And there might be some more expenditure later on because there are some things that have to be done, which must be done if it is to be maintained as a hotel of this standard.
Okay. Just to continue on the issue of cricket a little bit, has CARICOM gone as far as deciding that if the WICB does not toe the line that CARICOM wants them to toe, that they will withhold, for want of a better word, the use of the regional facilities from the WICB?
No, CARICOM has not done that.
Is that something they'll be looking at?
What CARICOM has done is to acknowledge that WICB and CARICOM had acknowledged that there was a problem with West Indies cricket and had put in place an examination of that problem, and a report has come forward. That report has made some specific recommendations to address the problem of decline of West Indies cricket. One of those recommendations, in fact probably the main one, is that the management structure needs to be changed and modernized, and for that to happen, the current board needs to be dissolved and an interim arrangement put in place while the long-term structure is worked out. That report has been resisted by the WICB, and for those persons who put the story in the Guardian about Trinidad interfering with the test match and threatening it, let me just put you all into the picture. The position taken by Trinidad and Tobago at the meeting in Belize is a position advanced to CARICOM by the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines before Trinidad and Tobago was there with me as leader. So since last year, St. Vincent and the Grenadines were advocating that the CARICOM cut time wasting with WICB. They didn't get the decision taken. This year it was taken. This matter of the CARICOM responding to the board's intransigence is that the board took a decision to report the situation to the ICC so they can be informed, and to the BCCI so that they can be informed. We didn't ask them for any particular action, but we thought we will share with them the state of play in the Caribbean, where the people through their representatives have taken a position unanimous that the product called West Indies cricket has this kind of problem. And it takes us to the other location where what is West Indies cricket and who owns it? So that's where the CARICOM is right now. In July, the matter comes up again in the heads of government meeting in Guyana. And hopefully by then, if good sense prevails, well then West Indies cricket might have a future.
Switching gears now to two issues I'd like you to clarify. First of all, is there any truth to the talk on the ground that Sandals has an interest in Pigeon Point? And also, I have been told that there exists or existed a cabinet note back when Carl would have began using the ATR fleet, sorry, the Dash 8 fleet, that mandated them to have those aircraft solely for use on the air bridge. Can you shed some light on that and whether, if that is so, that such an instruction would have extended towards the use of the ATRs?
Well, let me answer that one first. I don't have that information about the specific mandate which is the aircraft should remain only for Trinidad Tobago use, so I can't answer that question now, but it can be researched. And the other one about Sandals' interest in Pigeon Point, I'm not aware of that. I'm aware that they might have interest elsewhere. In Tobago, I mean.
Carice Nelson, Channel 5 News. Oh, sorry, hold on. All right, a few questions. You touched on the lack of the international flights to the island. What is the way forward to regain international flights here? As well as the issue... Let's
take the questions one by one, please. What's the first question?
You touched on the lack of international flights to the island. What is the way forward?
Well, I thought I addressed that in great detail, that we are asking Caribbean Airlines, Ministry of Finance, THA, to look at it and let CAL play. We expect that CAL can play a contributory role to solve what we identify as a major problem, which is the airlift at Tobago. So we'll wait to see what comes out of those examinations.
Okay, in regards to the port, we know that in regards to the ferries coming to and fro between Trinidad and Tobago, that's a major issue. What will be the plans going forward?
Well, this morning we didn't discuss the sea ferry at all, so except that to mention that it is part of an essential service, very much like the airlift. But I don't have new information for you on the ferry, so there's nothing to report today on that.
Mr. Prime Minister, I just wanted to know by chance if you received a 4-page letter by a PNM supporter with respect to land grabbing in Tobago. There's an issue with respect to that?
No, I have not.
Okay. An extensive story was seen in the Sunshine, I don't know if you saw it, with respect to land grabbing in Tobago.
No, I have not. I have not seen that story at all.
Dr. Rowley, just to ask you something that's been in the newspapers over the last couple of days, the issue of the state's case against Malcolm Jones being discontinued. And I'm asking whether or not you feel satisfied that the advice provided by QC Nelson was enough for that case to be dropped. And I'm asking it in the context that there have been a number of commentary in the papers today, a lot of political commentators saying that it reeks of political bias, one, and it should have been a matter for the courts to decide whether or not Mr. Jones, there was any wrongdoing on his part. Do you care to comment on that?
I'm glad that you're a brilliant young man, because you speak of the political commentators. So you get political commentary and political positions from political commentators. I wouldn't have called them that, but you, those were your words, right? But let me just address this issue. The matter in the court was a matter where Petrotrin, a state company, authorized the Office of the Attorney General to prosecute a matter in the court. That was the matter. It progressed to the point where a defense had to be put by Malcolm Jones. Petrotrin would have taken that position based on legal advice that some infraction on the part of Malcolm Jones exposed him to a prima facie case where he had to be held liable for, I think it's $100 and something million US, $2 billion. $2 billion. That case was progressing through the court. In it, as part of his defense, Malcolm Jones asked for the evidence that was tendered in the arbitration, because before Petrotrin took a decision to go to court and to continue with the decision by way of a lawsuit, there was an arbitration between Petrotrin and Petrotrin's partner in this GTL plant. The government, the Attorney General's office, acting for Petrotrin, suppressed the information with respect to the evidence in the arbitration. So Petrotrin's own lawyers did not have that information available to them when they advised Petrotrin to proceed to file suit against Malcolm Jones. So the suit went on, the lawyering went on to the tune of $41 million, and eventually, in getting the evidence from the arbitration on the same matter, it was now seen by Petrotrin's own lawyers for the first time that evidence in the arbitration makes the case against Malcolm Jones virtually a nullity. Those lawyers which were not interfered with by this government, the same lawyers that were prosecuting the matter from the beginning, who advised that the matter go to court because there was a case to be had, those same lawyers, on seeing the evidence that was suppressed, when they now saw the evidence, and remember that evidence came out only as a result of Malcolm Jones demanding that the evidence of the arbitration be brought forward. When that evidence came forward, the Petrotrin lawyers told Petrotrin, you no longer have a case that has a good chance in the court. That's what the matter is. Now let me ask you, fellow citizens, if your lawyer advised you to sue somebody when certain evidence wasn't available, and then that evidence comes up, some evidence comes up later, and the same lawyer say to you, listen, I don't think we should proceed with this because we have no chance of winning it. Would you allow it to continue in the court so that you could lose it and pay $40 million more in legal fees? Or would you take the advice of the same lawyers who advised you in the beginning, saying to you now that in the face of new evidence you no longer have a case like we thought you had? And that is the matter. And remember, it is not the Attorney General that this advice came to. It was Petrotrin lawyers advising Petrotrin at the board level that this case has no merit. But interestingly enough, Malcolm Jones is being held accountable for a board that didn't do right based on the information that the board had and so on. So he's facing $2 billion in lawsuits. What would the current board face if the lawyers say to them, you have no case, and they proceed to continue in the court and they run up another $50 million in debt to the country? Who is going to hold them accountable, or shouldn't they be held accountable? Let's look at it. The case is based on a board not acting properly when, according to certain points of view, when certain information was available. Now you have another board being told by lawyers of the company, not even new lawyers who we brought in, the same lawyers, saying to the company, based on the new evidence coming to us from the arbitration, our advice to you is that a court will not uphold the case that we have. What is the advice we've been getting? That this new board must disregard that advice. Well, the new board didn't. The new board took the advice of the lawyers, and the board took a decision to discontinue the matter. And since the matter was being prosecuted by the AG's office on behalf of the board, it falls to the AG to conclude it. What then is the problem? Of course, there are those who are saying that the matter should be allowed to run its course in the court. $41 million even before it came to court. And more than that, one of the reasons why the lawyer advised them to end the matter is because they reached the stage, $41 million later, where a trial date was set for the matter. 2 dates were set in February, this month. And at the time when the trial date had reached, Petrotrin, who initiated the matter, could not file witness statements in the court. You get the picture? So lawyers have earned $40-odd million on this matter, but there's no witness statement to prosecute Malcolm Jones in the court. So you go to court and say, I want to prosecute Malcolm Jones, but I don't have any evidence. Let's go. Let's proceed. That is what the commentators don't know. They're thinking that this is a matter of sobriety. It is not. This is a matter which the facts ought to be known to the taxpayer who pays the bills as to whether whoever it is, the board, should have continued for another 5 or 10 years on this matter. And if before it got to the court, it was $41 million, and the case has not even begun, what kind of legal fees do you think will end? And then your lawyer tells you have virtually no chance of winning the case. What then is the board to do? So as a government, we are advised by the Attorney General, in whom we have confidence, and as a taxpayer, the question should be this. The former Attorney General who initiated the matter, who is going to ask him why the evidence was suppressed so that Mr. Nelson only saw the arbitration proceedings $41 million later? Who is answering that question? And who is going to be held accountable for the $41 million that should never have been spent? And those are my questions.
Mr. Prime Minister, Sita Bridgemohan from New State Tobago. I want to come back to tourism and Tobago. And you pointed out, you listed some issues or some suggestions or some, what do you say? You talked about airlift for Tobago in the face of falling occupancy, and you talked about getting CAL, and you talked about a desal plan. But those seem to me, and a beach for Magdalena, those seem to me to be long-term solutions, and the problem seems to be immediate. And you pointed out that Magdalena lost guests last December, late last year, because there was no water. So what are short-term measures to deal with falling occupancy? Because Magdalena is not the tourism sector in Tobago. There is a thriving, there's a lot of hotels, they're not thriving. But there are other hotels, there are other guest houses, there's a tourism sector in Tobago, not just Magdalena. So what are short-term measures that we're looking at?
I didn't address the short-term matters because those matters, to the best of my knowledge, have already been properly addressed by the Chief Secretary, pointing out that certain WASA has done certain things or are in the process of doing certain things to do the short-term. So I'm sure that you would have heard that certain wells are being brought on, more aggressive water trucking and so on and so on. What I sought to address is to solve the problem, the perennial problem, where every dry season we end up in a situation where we have to treat with a water shortage. So what the cabinet dealt with today is how do we get the infrastructure in place so that seasons dry or season wet, there's a proper supply of water in Tobago. And that's why we talked about the use of desalination, and we talk about the medium and long term. And again, it doesn't have to take a long time. But if it has to be done, the first day is the best day to start.
Okay, so, well, perhaps I should be addressing these questions to Mr. London, really.
Maybe Chief Secretary can help you?
Yes. So,
the immediacy.
So, Mr. Chief Secretary, I know WASA has said to us here in Tobago that we have these wells that they're operationalizing at the end of April, that they expect to come on stream at the end of April. So what do we do? February, March, what do we do now, apart from the water trucks that are coming? And can we ask the Prime Minister, who's here in your meetings with him, to get WASA to work a little faster? and do the wells at the end of, at the beginning of March or 2 weeks or something. There must be some way we could, because at the end of April is the end of the dry season. Tobago is going to spend the dry season without water, but truck-borne water.
Well, I think WASA has provided us with a comprehensive document on the various things that they're going to do and the timelines. But we got to bear in mind that they have to work with what is available. And there are some realities which they have to treat. Another aspect that they are working on is, of course, the control of leaks, because you realize we lose about 40% of our one water, and that is not delivered. So that is one other area that could bring some immediate effect. But I think that WASA has also said something, and maybe this is a kind of immediate response, that we are in fact among the most inefficient users of water in the region. And one way that by which we can alleviate, not resolve, but alleviate the position is what we as Tobagonians do. We have been saying that for the longest while, that we have to start treating this as a crisis, and each individual has to do something to ensure that they don't exacerbate the crisis. That to me maybe is the most effective short-term measure.
Oh, the problem that we're dealing with is that whatever happened, we are now this year at this moment, you're talking about this moment. It's not a very good situation to be in, to be building a fire brigade when the fire has started. So there are two things happening here. There's the immediate response and there's the long and medium term, so that we won't have to be building the fire brigade and the fire. So the points that we put out this morning are points that are meant to treat with the genuine water shortage on the island, improve the supply of water.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. I just want to take you to a different topic. The Attorney General for Barbados, in speaking to some citizens there, he was saying that, you know, they should take comfort that their crime situation is not as bad as our crime situation. Just want to get your reaction to that statement, please.
Well, I'm glad I'm not in Barbados, because I wouldn't say that to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It's not a comparative position that will bring comfort to people who think that their safety and security are being compromised. So he might have good reason to say that. I don't know that, but Trinidad and Tobago, what we should be concerned about is that we're being viewed as a worst case. We don't like that position at all. So, and we're working assiduously to ensure that we're not seen as the poster boys for criminal conduct.
Can you tell us what you're going to do about that? Can you tell us what are you going to do about the fact that we're being seen as a worst case in terms of crime in the region?
Well, we have certain structural things to do, which we're doing. I mean, we've made certain changes to information gathering. We are taking certain steps to improve our policing. We have integrated the entire national security effort in responses. We are making changes and improvement in the personnel, and you saw us taking steps to ensure that we have proper head of the police service, because the police service is the agency that is our response to the criminal element. Whatever we say or do, it is a proper functioning, efficient police service that would be required to be in place. Now the problem has moved from the police to the prison, and that too has now become an additional problem. So we are also treating with that. There are some things outside of our control. They may lie with the judiciary, and we believe that as Churchill said, England expects every man to do his duty. We expect every man and woman in Trinidad and Tobago to do his or her duty on this matter of fighting crime. The government intends to make the necessary resources available and to hold people accountable. And in the coming weeks, you will see us putting in those kinds of new approaches in place.
Do you view capital punishment as a possible backdoor?
I don't understand the question.
Do you think the resumption of hanging would bring consequences to the murders that the country is experiencing?
Well, the current law in Trinidad and Tobago, where there's crime and there's punishment prescribed, the punishment for the crime of capital punishment is loss of life by hanging, and that is the law. And but the problem, the real problem over and above that we have is before you could hang anybody, you have to find out who committed the crime. Then you have to arrest them. Then you have to charge them. Then you have to get a conviction. And then after they're convicted, you have to carry out the hanging within a particular period of time. So if all of those precursors are not in fact in place, then hanging is but a pipe dream. Because you can only hang who you convict. And who you convict within 5 years. And worse, you need to know who committed the crime. So our detection levels let's start on the foundation. Let us detect who committed the crime and get such person off the street into incarceration, get the trials speedy, and then you could talk about hanging. Because all kinds of impediments are in the way. So there are a number of things that the government is focusing on, and when they all come together, I mean, even as we're fighting crime at the level of the Privy Council, convicted murderers, we have new crime to fight in the schools now. School children now on charges going to court in large numbers. Now, this is not a good place and a good situation to be in, but we can't give up in any way. We got to fight on all fronts.
Prime Minister, March signals 6 months your office. You're in office. What are your thoughts on your tenure so far, and what is your major challenge? I know crime is one of the challenges that you faced so far.
If I am to mention the two major challenges we have, one is our financial crisis. We do have a financial crisis because remember, people, we were running this country at one time with oil well over $120 a barrel. So we set our pace there. And then it came down to 100, then to 80, then to 45, and then now we are under 30. And whether we like it or not, we have to admit that our major revenue stream has been in the hydrocarbon sector, oil and gas. We are down on volume and we're down on price. That's the major challenge. And in parallel, we have explosive criminal conduct. Those two things together contribute to a major deterioration in the quality of life in Trinidad and Tobago.
I just have a couple of questions. In terms of prison officers wanting to walk off the job, what's your view on that? Also, the unavailability of US dollars in the country, and what is the government's take in dealing with that situation? Because a lot of businesses are calling. And the last one is with respect to the hangman. Do you think there needs to be a resumption of hangings in Tobago? Should we hang someone tomorrow?
Let me deal with the prison officers. I understand what prison officers are going through because they interface directly with the criminal element in the country, and they are responsible for the securing of such persons and others, and their job is a peculiar one. Now that the criminal element has turned on them so as to create the kind of fear and the kinds of responses that you're talking about walking off the job, all I will say to prison officers is that the population expects that you, like every other citizen, will do your duty, even in the face of the challenges that you are being asked to face, and the government will do what it can do to ensure your safety and your protection. The other question you mentioned, well, there's not an unavailability. There might not be enough to do all that we need to do, but that's the reality. We earn US dollars from selling oil and gas, and we're not selling as much oil and as much gas. So it is an understandable position that we do not have. What we do have is some that we had held from the last time. We had some reserves. And the question is how we spend that. And do we spend it out on what? And then we have none at all. I said before, and I'm saying it again, one of the duties of this government is to not bring us to a state where we run out of foreign exchange.
Prime Minister.
And in trying to discharge that responsibility, there will be situations where the shortages are there. We have to prioritize. Do we need foreign exchange spent on medicine, or do we spend on something else that is less important? We have to prioritize. And I would like the nation to prioritize at the personal level.
Prime Minister, just a question. Earlier this week, is it this week or last week, one of your ministers decided to close off all of her accounts at a particular banking institution because of what appeared to be a breach of client confidentiality. And I'm wondering, what are your comments on that? Do you have accounts at First Citizens? Are you confident in leaving your accounts there?
I have a credit card account at FCB. And again, I don't want to get involved in this matter too much because it's a private matter between a client of the bank and as Office of Prime Minister, speaking from that office, I don't want to give this life. Clearly there was a breach in confidentiality, and the transaction, whatever you might think of the transaction, the bank has a duty to preserve confidence. And I'm sure the bank is not happy that this story is out there. In this case, it's a minister of government, but it could easily be somebody else. And your question is if I am comfortable, and the answer is no, because I have a credit card in FCB. And suppose I go and buy some underwear for my wife, and I didn't deliver it to her in time, and somebody tells the press, I have another story. You understand what I mean? It might sound funny, but we take these things for granted, but they're not to be taken for granted. If I don't have confidence, and I take you back, I was somewhere as a minister when it came out in the press, an allegation made that I had given a loan to Wendell Motley. Remember that story? I had caused ADB to give Wendell Motley a loan. And Wendell Motley's business at the ADB had become put in the public domain. That's a bank. Of course, there was no truth in the matter because I knew nothing about it, but there was a loan that he had taken quite properly. But somebody in the bank got it to the government that there was this loan and so on and so on. And I asked the Minister of Finance then, what is your position on the bank, the state bank, in this case the ADB, preserving confidentiality of its client's business? And the answer from the government is that it's a government bank and the government has ought to have access to the government bank. And I said, well, in which case, I will close my account at FCB. Because if that is the government's position, that because it's a government bank, confidentiality and privacy in my transaction is not to be preserved. And I did publicly close my account at FCB. And I said I will return to the bank when good governance returns in the country. And subsequently, the PNM came back into office, and I reopened my account. That's why I have a credit card there now. So your question is, what do I do? I'm thinking about it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister. My name is Mosha Ramsey with the Tobago News. Just briefly returning to the desalination plant, has there been any discussion or any indication of an estimate for the implementation of this?
There is no desalination plant at this stage. What you have is a decision to look at desalination as a process that can supply water. So we're not yet at the point of talking about the plant and the cost.
Okay. Just staying on the topic of the water issues, as the desalination plant is one measure that is being discussed, are there any other discussions, for example, with regards to the Hillsborough Dam and what role that may play going forward?
I'm aware that there are discussions. As a matter of fact, before we spoke of desalination, we had taken steps to desilt the Hillsborough Dam, which is to remove silt in the dam, which is occupying the space that water should occupy. But we were told by WASA that, well, I'm giving it a fourth hand. I was told by the THA that the position at WASA is that if we do the desilting, which we should have to do, we will only end up with 1 million gallons more?
Yes, 1 month supply.
1 month supply. That will be the addition at Hillsborough. That would not fundamentally change the situation. So while we probably will eventually do the desilting, but that is not the solution to the problem. right? So that's another something that we can do and probably will do. But we probably would still have the need to add more water to the supply in Tobago.
So is it that the decision has been taken that WASA will be doing the desilting in-house as was previously considered?
No, that decision is not taken as this stage and whether it's in-house or outside. But the idea of increasing the water supply in Tobago, desilting the dam is on the table as one of the things to do.
Okay. How soon can we expect appointment for the board at PTSC? And can you update us on the issue granting of additional licenses for maxi taxi operators to help alleviate the current public transportation system in Tobago? And has the government given any consideration, along with the THA, to fund or in any way assist in the construction of a new bus terminal and or assistance in purchasing new buses?
Let me take the last one first. I know there's consideration with respect to Tobago getting some additional buses, but the new buses, I understand, are to be CNG buses, and Tobago does not have a facility for fueling those buses, but steps are being taken aggressively to change that, and I think a location, the Chief Secretary reported today that a location has been found, and steps are being taken to pass that location very quickly to NP so that we can have in Tobago a CNG facility so that we can then have CNG buses. And the other thing that you mentioned, which is the bus terminal, I do not have any information I can share with you at this time about the licenses and the maxi taxis and so on, so I wouldn't want to comment on that at this time.
And for the Chief Secretary, are you still as confident as we were prior to last week about the state's ownership of the Friendship Estate?
What do you mean?
Given the recent developments that took place there, is there still absolute confidence that the state is on the right path with respect to Friendship?
That was never in dispute and still isn't.
Because there are people who are coming forward with and they came to the MC, and we know that you have said that the THA is about to monetize, set up an operation in Friendship. So can you comment?
No, I'm responding to the question there, and I'm saying that the ownership of Friendship, as far as I'm concerned, was never in dispute. So there's no question of confidence. You know, it's just a fact that it belongs to Friendship regardless of what anybody says, right? But I'm not certain I understand the question you're asking.
Yes, because there are people who have come forward with deeds, with documents, laying claims to Friendship Estate in the line of the same thing. So I just wanted to, well, I suppose you responded that.
Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, it's not an issue that is worth having any problems about.
Well, we've been doing this for quite some time, so I think we should end this now because I think the questions are drifting off into some other matters which we can't handle. This sounds like, you know, deeds and questionable ownership. That's a normal thing around the country these days. Thank you very much, members of the media. Thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
You're welcome.
Please do it again very soon.
Thank you.
Welcome to this afternoon's Playway Pick 2 and Pick 4 draw, supervised by independent auditors KPMG and presided over by the National Lotteries Control Board. Good luck, everyone.
Good afternoon. It's Thursday, March 3rd, 2016.